So I've owned my 1971 Lotus Elan Plus 2S 130 for about 4 months now, and I thought it was about time we learnt a bit more about how it came about and where the world-renowned name Lotus started. But to do that, we've got to go right back. That brings us to the original Lotus factory, which was started by this man. Now this gentleman in the cap is a Mr. Colin Chapman. A graduate of the University College of London, Chapman was an intelligent man and from a young age committed himself to his lifelong passion, racing. His knowledge in aeronautical techniques from his brief time in the RAF and structural engineering which he studied at university allowed him to build his first race car in 1948, a modified Austin 7 which he entered privately into local racing events. Why he named the car Lotus was never properly addressed, but one of several theories is that his girlfriend at the time and his later wife had a nickname of Lotus Blossom, so that could have had something to do with it. He had a lot of success with the Mark I Lotus, and with his prize money he developed the Mark II, which also dominated events. He kept developing different marks of the car until he was doing so well that the Mark VI he decided to sell as a kit. Over 100 of the Mark VI were sold, but it was when he got to the Lotus 7 in 1957 that things really started to take off. Caterham Cars still manufacture a version of that car today, and there have been over 90 different Lotus 7 clones, replicas and derivatives offered to the public by a variety of makers. Chapman progressed through the racing series, dominating until he reached Formula 1, where he crashed into his teammate Mike Hawthorne, ending his career as a driver, and allowing him to focus on the technical side of the sport. Along with John Cooper, he revolutionised the Premier Motorsport. Their small, lightweight, mid-engine vehicles gave away much in terms of power, but superior handling meant they very often beat the likes of Ferrari and Maserati. And eventually, with Jim Clark at the wheel, Lotus appeared to win whenever it pleased them. With Jim Clark driving the Lotus 25, they won their first ever Formula 1 World Championship in 1963. Clark and Chapman developed almost a brother-like relationship, and Clark's death in 1968 at the German Grand Prix devastated Chapman, who publicly said he'd lost his best friend. We should all take a minute to remember what a legendary driver he was, and his stats dwarfed that of Schumacher and Hamilton. He truly was the best that ever lived, and he drove for Lotus. In 1959, Lotus Companies was formed. It split Lotus into Lotus Cars, which focused on road cars and customer competition car production, and Lotus Components, which became Lotus Racing in 1971. Obviously, this was their racing division. This idea of a split company worked well, as orders were piling in for the Lotus 7, and the racing division were winning a lot of races in the Formula 1 series. Lotus are famous for staying true to their heritage. The best example of this is that they've been in the same factory at Hethel since 1966 and still remain there until this day. As a former RAF site, it was perfect. It had many large hangars which we converted into factory buildings, and most of all it had a runway, which is ideal for testing cars around. Now the one that started the Lotus road car phenomenon that we know was in 1957 when they made the Lotus Elite. I'm sure you'll all agree, they definitely got this one right. The cars that follow the Elite are the cars Lotus are known for, with a fiberglass body and a highly tuned Lotus engine, and handling which is the same technology that was used in their championship-winning Formula 1 car. You can see why people were in awe of these things. This was the start of the Lotus Elan. What Lotus did with the Elan is how most manufacturers operate now. They picked 3 points of the car that had to be perfect. The engine, which was made and tuned by Lotus. The handling, which is what Lotus are known for, and the body, which was 100% fiberglass. Everything else was off other cars, so Lotus didn't have to spend time developing parts and making them. They could concentrate on what mattered to them. So there you go guys, I'm doing this video in 2 parts. So obviously this is the first half, the second half will be up shortly. Let me know what you think of this one, and if there's anything you'd like me to do differently in the next one. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys soon. Pick up a penny, can somebody